You're listening to the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast, episode 23, and this is the third of our 3 listener Q&A episodes, where this week I'm answering your questions about exams, revision, exams, music, and exams. Did I say exams? Let's go. I'm Katie Jones, and with over 15 years in education as an award-winning high school teacher, international external examiner, and as a study coach, I've helped thousands of students skyrocket their results and confidence. And this podcast is where I share all my insights, tactics, and tips with you, the parent, so you can help your hardworking teen get happy, smart, and successful in their study, and have you both enjoy the journey along the way. This is the Parents of Hardworking Teens podcast. Hey VIPs, I hope you are having a brilliant week. Mine is going really well, and I'm pretty excited because I'm getting everything ready for our Get Your Teen Ahead Over Summer event week, which is, mark your calendars, tell your friends, running from the 15th to the 21st of November. And I know that for some parents and students, the school holidays are a time for total rest, relaxation, not even thinking about anything study related, which I totally get. I am definitely not someone who is here wanting your teen studying every hour of every day. In fact, it's the strategies and skills that I want every teen to have that are really all about getting tasks done faster, more smoothly, more confidently, and more easily so that they actually have a better life balance. So if you are interested in finding out a few small but mighty ways that your teen can set themselves up for success next year, while they do have a little bit more time and headspace in the summer, then keep an eye on your emails and I'll be sharing more information with you in a couple of weeks. And I will be including a link in those emails. So if you do not want to hear anything about ways to get ahead over summer, then you can absolutely click that and I will not be coming into your inbox with anything like that. But I can't help myself. I've got to say this. If the reason that the holidays stay totally sacrosanct is because your teen is just so burnt out from term, then actually I really would love for you to hear some of the advice and tips that I'm going to be sharing in those emails and at that event, because that is one type of student I really want to help so that holidays aren't just for recovery and recuperation because your teen has been holding on for dear life to make it through, and actually have holidays be part of a balanced life where term time is doable, burnout isn't hovering, threatening to take over. So I do really feel like I want to just say that, but more on all of that in a couple of weeks. And if you aren't already on my email list and you want to get this sort of information and these free tips and insights and special events, you can get on there by grabbing my free parent guide on the Rock Solid Study website. It's called The 3 Huge Mistakes Even Smart Students Make in Exams and Assignments and How to Fix Them. So just go to www.rocksolidstudy.com, find that button, click on it, fill out the request, and you'll be added to my list. Okay, so let's get into today's episode. It is the third of our listener Q&A episodes. I have really enjoyed not just answering your questions, but also receiving them. And so I hope that you're finding these episodes helpful. The previous 2, if you're interested and haven't yet heard them, are in episodes 15 and 19, if you want to check those out. And I might do some more in future, but I've actually got a long list of topics and tools and concepts that I want to share with you over the coming weeks and months. So stick with me and make sure you're subscribed or following the podcast on your device to make sure you get each new episode as it is released. Now, I've picked out for today some exam-related questions because I know that many of you have teens sitting their finals right now, and that many other students are going to have some sort of end-of-year style exams coming up as well. So let's get straight into things. Let's kick off with this one. What are your top revision tips? My daughter is currently spending hours writing notes, and although I've heard you talk about active revision, I'm not sure how to explain what she should be doing. Okay, I love that you have mentioned active revision here, and you're definitely on the right track with this. Active revision is basically the opposite of passive revision, and passive revision is what many students are doing. That's where they're going over information. So many students will say things like, I'm going over my notes, which might mean reading them or highlighting them or rewriting them. And this is passive revision. Other things might be watching a study video, reading a chapter from a textbook, copying out information, like copying out a diagram, hoping that it's going to stick in their memory, or copying out or writing out many times sets of quotes. This means that they are seeing or listening to the information, but it doesn't mean that they are understanding it, digesting it, or actually going to remember it. And so there's a big problem here, because not only can these passive revision techniques, to put it bluntly, be a bit of a waste of time or a big waste of time, but more significantly, they can actually be detrimental, because what happens is the fact that doing this makes students feel like they have been studying or revising, they've been putting in the hours, it gives them a false sense of accomplishment or confidence. It leads to what I call the familiarity delusion, where because something feels familiar, we've gone over it, we feel like we know it. And there have been many studies done on this concept. But one example that you can do right now with me is to think of the Google logo. Okay, so we all see it a lot. We'd all recognize it for sure. And we could probably start to describe it, but could we get the order of the colors of the letters correct? Or take something like the Apple logo. This would probably work well for your teen. Trying to replicate things like this is actually really hard, because something can feel familiar, and that is very different. Because something being familiar is very different to actually being able to recall it and apply it. I know that thinking about it right now, I certainly couldn't. I don't even think I could get the first letter correct. I'm going to go with blue, but we'll see. And there's some reds and yellows, and there might be a green, but I've no idea what the order is. But the point is that something being familiar is very different to actually being able to recall it and apply it. And that's just something as simple as colors and symbols on a logo. When it comes to study, there's of course information that's much more complex that your team needs to be taking in, digesting, recalling, and getting down from brain to paper in the exam hall. And this is where some students feel like they say things like, I just go blank in the exam hall. And they usually aren't going blank. They just didn't truly understand or digest or commit that information to memory in the first place. They just felt like they did because it was familiar, because they went over it. And this is why I encourage all students to revise actively, where they're actually doing. And what that means is they're actually doing something with the information, transforming it in some way. So if it's a set of notes, the most simple version of this is condensing and rewriting those notes into bullet points into their own words. So I'm never saying that writing notes is always a bad thing, but they do need to be transforming and processing those notes into something else. Converting the wording, condensing the wording does count as transforming, because they're not just copying. But even better is for them to put that information across in a whole different format. Maybe a mind map, a flow diagram, a table. Maybe they're categorizing or ordering statements. Or if it's already something that's in a visual form, let's say it's a diagram of the heart maybe, instead of redrawing it over and over, that sort of testing only really works for very short-term memory. What will make that information stick better is if they can write, let's say, 5 sentences explaining what each part of the heart does and how, where it's positioned, how do the different parts link up. So to explain this to your daughter, for the parent who asked this question, the key question here is, how will she know she knows it? when she's covered information, how will she know that it is in her brain? How will she know that it has not only gone in, but is truly understood and can be retrieved from brain to paper in the exam hall? And the best way to know that is to be able to transform the information, to take information that's in one format and turn it into another. And when we think about it, even doing things like practice questions and practice papers is transforming. It's taking the information that they have learned and putting it across as an answer to a particular way that a question is asking for it. Okay, next question. What is an ideal pre-exam routine? There's really two parts to this. There's the practical and then there's the mental side of exam preparation. And of course, there's a whole lot that needs to happen with their revision and their scheduling of that. But I think from this question, you're probably meaning, that time immediately before the exam, the morning of, the hour before, maybe even the night before an exam. So I'll focus on those. So firstly, and I know that you as the parent listening right now, all parents already know this, but I can't not say it. There is so much research that shows how much difference having enough sleep makes to our brains and then how we go on to perform in cognitive tasks and tests. Not having enough sleep means more mistakes. And in an exam, that means things like making silly slips in maths calculations, maybe transcription errors, or putting a plus instead of a minus, or little mental calculation mistakes or conversion errors. Maybe writing something like 0.5 hours equals 50 minutes. Those sorts of little mistakes. And it can also mean misreading a question. Just the other day, I saw a student write out the start of an essay having restated the question incorrectly. Instead of writing "to what effect," they wrote "to what extent." And that would have sent them on totally the wrong path. Now, that may have been nothing to do with their sleep. I have no idea. But when we do have enough sleep, we are sharper and our brains think faster. They make faster connections so we can make faster links and come up with better ideas. And the same also goes for hydration. Loads of evidence out there on how adequate hydration helps our brain perform. So let's talk briefly about food and drink for your teen. Encourage your teen to eat a good dinner the night before and to not end up eating too late at night because that's going to make it harder for them to sleep well. Now, tea and coffee in the morning might be tempting for the caffeine, but it's the caffeine that makes those drinks diuretic. So they can end up being dehydrating and are also going to mean more bathroom breaks are needed. So water is best, and they likely will want to take in a water bottle. So side note for that, for external exams, it has to be a totally clear bottle. No brand or even label is allowed on it. And have them make sure that they keep any water bottles on the floor next to their desk, not on their desk, so that there are no chances of spillages. And being well hydrated is important, but they only want to be taking small sips from time to time. Otherwise, same thing as we mentioned earlier, they're going to be needing bathroom breaks, and that uses up time from their exam. And just having to get up and do that can interrupt their brain flow. So hopefully they can get a good balance going on there. So let's add in having a good breakfast. Something with slow release energy is ideal. So it might be porridge or oatmeal, eggs, a banana. Definitely not those energy drinks that give a quick burst but are then followed by a fast drop-off in energy and alertness. Now, I know that I could barely eat when I was really nervous before an exam, so I get that they might not want to eat much. So maybe try something that they can kind of nibble on. That might be good. Maybe some wholemeal toast, a banana maybe. That might be helpful. Okay, some other practicalities. It's really important to know the exact equipment that they need to have with them and what they can't have. So what are they permitted and what are they not permitted in the exam hall? So for example, simple things like, do they need to be writing with blue or black pen? Have they had their calculator pre-approved for external exams? Do they need a pencil or a ruler for any graphs or sketching or maybe multiple choice questions where they have to color in those little bubbles and they are done by optical readers? So they need those done in pencil sometimes. And have plenty of spare, already sharp pencils. That is preferable to having one pencil plus a pencil sharpener. There are no smartwatches allowed for externals. So if they want to have a watch, make sure that they've got a good old-fashioned one. They can't have anything with a SIM card in it, in fact. And I say all of these things, and I know some of them sound super obvious, but you'll be amazed by the number of students that do get caught out by these things. Now, it's not a disaster if they do. They're not going to be instantly failed or any of those other things that, get spread around as Chinese whispers. So they don't need to panic. I have never seen a paper that has actually just not been marked because the student used the wrong color pen. But we just don't want anything that's going to increase their stress or make them anxious just before the exam. We don't want anything to be a distraction for them and, their focus and their mindset. So having all of that set up and ready to go, at least the night before, is going to take off any pressure of finding and organizing those things on the day or late at night the day before. And likewise, think about having a plan for how they are getting to the exam venue. For a start, do they know exactly which room or hall to be going to? It may not be their usual place or where they expect it to be. And checking transport if needed. If they're traveling by car, they need to be setting off extra early in case of any traffic issues or parking issues. If it's by public transport, then have the timetable to hand. Make sure to pick a route and a time that gets them earlier than they need to be. For external exams, often the start times can be quite different to the normal school bus times. And then in that hour or two before the exam, this really is where every teenager is different. And so there isn't necessarily a right or wrong way to do things at this time, but there are definitely some things to be aware of. Now, I know that a lot of advice says to not be cramming or revising just before an exam. And I always used to hear people with that phrase of, oh, well, if you don't know it by now, then you're never going to know it. That kind of gets thrown around. But personally, I would actually feel more anxious if I couldn't look over my notes. And even now, before I give a talk or a presentation or deliver a webinar, I like to go through some of my slides or review some of the key points that I want to say. So it can help calm your teen to just be able to review a few things, give themselves some reminders, or talk through some concepts with a friend. But when it comes to any last-minute revision, I do think I've found out a bit of a deciding factor on this, on whether or not it's going to be beneficial or just end up adding to the stress. So this is just from what I've seen and experienced, both myself as a student and with so many students that I've worked with. And that's to consider, are they reviewing or are they actually trying to learn or remember something new? I would suggest that they don't really want to be trying to learn or cover something for the first time so close to the exam. That's when it can become stressful. If they feel like they're not really getting it or it's challenging or confusing in some way, that's just going to add to their stress levels. So of course, that's why it's so important to have really well-planned revision so that everything in the syllabus is getting covered well before the exam. But I do think that covering things that they have already learnt and reviewing it just so it's fresh in their mind can give them some reassurance, and it can help them recall that information in the exam if they have just looked over it. I actually have my very own example and story of this happening for me. It was with my GCSE PE exam. So way back, I was 16 years old. And as I walked to school the day of that exam, thankfully, it was one of the few days in England where it wasn't raining because I walked with a friend. She was in the year below me and she didn't have any exams on. And I literally walked whilst reading the textbook on this particular topic, which I can't remember what the topic was, but I felt like I kind of needed to go through it again. I didn't feel like I 100%, remembered all the parts. So I read out parts aloud. I had her test me on bits and pieces from the book. And you know what? That exact topic came up as the big 10-mark question at the end of the paper. And I was able to write a really good answer. Now, I have no idea what that particular answer actually got, but I did end up with an A-star grade overall, which I am certain would not have happened if I hadn't reviewed that topic right before the exam. So I am not advocating and saying that students should do this. I'm just saying that that helped me. And I know there's a lot of advice out there saying that they shouldn't be looking at things before the exam. So I just wanted to offer that up as an alternative. So equipment ready, transport scheduled, a good night's sleep, slow release energy breakfast, avoiding high sugar, high caffeine drinks, and if they feel more calm reviewing their notes before, then go for it. If that tends to stress them out, have them find something else to do, like going for a walk or listening to music, something that keeps them calm but doesn't put them to sleep. And on a similar note, for some students, talking and mingling with friends is good, but for others, they might be better off finding just a quiet spot to themselves. So have your teen take a few moments just to really think about what works best for them so they can really set things up to make that happen. Okay, next question. It says, heated debate in my home right now. I know all teenagers are different, but I'm pretty sure that having music on is not helping my teen study, though they beg to differ. Would love your professional opinion. Thanks. Easy answer for this one, but almost always unpopular with students. So brace yourselves. There is a reason why many students feel like music helps them study. And this could well be the thing that helps you explain this to your teen or helps get them on board. And it's because music can lift our mood and motivation levels. So it makes sense that we then feel more positive, and that can make us more inclined to get things done that we don't really want to do, which for many students is their study or their revision. But here's the but. When it comes to using our actual working memory, having to process or compute information, we are best off with silence. So caveat now, if we are working in a space where there isn't silence, then music with earbuds or headphones on can help drown out other more distracting noises. But that music needs to not have any lyrics, no words, because our brain will subconsciously be listening to the words, which then distracts from the information or the processing that we need to be doing, which is why Baroque and other classical music has been found to help with study. And there are hours of this type of music available for free on YouTube, but be careful there. We don't want that to open up the whole phone distraction issue. So find a way to get that music if they really need it without ads interrupting or having the distraction of potential funny cat videos popping up. So how about this as my suggestion as a bit of a combo? Maybe they could have their favorite motivating music for maybe 5 or 10 minutes to get them pumped up and ready to study. And then they have silence or that Baroque or classical music during their study, and then another burst of the fun stuff during a study break. That could perhaps be not just a compromise, but it could actually produce the best of both worlds. Now, I've not personally tried it, but if you do, go ahead. Let me know how it works out. I'd love to hear. So, final question for today. Do you have any tips for time management in exams? My teen's problem is that he runs out of time to get every question done in as much detail as he'd like. This is a great question. Running out of time usually occurs because students are writing too much in their answers. They're including information that might be factually correct, but it isn't earning them any credit on the mark scheme. And that might be because they're repeating themselves a bit, they're waffling, they're just trying to put in as much information as possible to kind of show off their knowledge, but likely really because they aren't sure exactly what will and won't be getting the marks. And so they're trying to cover all bases. Now, I do help students work out how to divide up time in an exam for different sections of a paper, or figure out things like how many marks per minute or how many minutes per mark, depending on which one's bigger. But I spend a lot more time and effort training students in how to dissect the wording of the questions, how to understand mark schemes, and actually go further to be able to predict what the mark scheme is going to say just from reading a question. Because if your teen can't do those things, then even if they do give themselves a really clear time guide, if they have the what, the time that they've allocated, they're still going to end up going if they can't do the how, if they don't have the skills and strategies on how to stick to that allocation. I am all about the how when it comes to teens and their study. So let's say they've worked out that they should be spending 45 minutes, let's say, on part A of a paper. How do they then give answers with the right amount of information and detail within that time? So this is where the wording of this parent question is really interesting. You said that they run out of time to get every question done in as much detail as they'd like. The issue is likely them thinking or wanting or liking to put in as much information as possible into their responses, whereas actually, this needs to be about them truly understanding how much detail is really required, what information specifically, and then how to give that and do it at the right level and succinctly and directly. It's about them knowing what is and what isn't required, what will and won't get them marks. So they're confident in not just what to include and how to give that to the examiner, but also be just as confident on what to leave out, what isn't required. And the good news is that both of those come from the same skills, dissecting the question and being able to understand or even better predict the mark scheme. And as a practical action, a great way to start doing this is to go back and have them review any exams that they've already completed. And can they figure out what in their writing actually got them the marks that they received and what is there in their answers that didn't earn them any credit? And remember, for everyone listening, it doesn't mean that that information is incorrect. It just means that it wasn't required for that question. All right, they were fantastic questions. And if you sent in a question and I haven't covered yours in these 3 Q&A episodes, then rest assured it is because I have a future episode planned where I'll be diving deeper on the issue or the topic that you asked about. And so if you haven't already clicked to follow or subscribe to this podcast, then do that now. There's going to be a little button somewhere on your device that has a plus sign on it. Click on that, and it will turn into a tick. And then you won't miss an episode. And if you have a friend or family member or a school or parents group chat, and you think others might find this podcast helpful, then please take a screenshot of this episode and drop that to them. I love sharing my favorite podcasts with people, not just because it does feel good to be helpful and offer some help to people, but also, selfish confession, it also means that I can then chat with them about things that I've listened to in there, and that's fun and super helpful for me as well. So that's it for this week. Remember that if you want some tips on using a tiny bit of headspace over summer to get your teen ahead, ready for huge success next year without them having to touch a textbook and still keeping plenty of time for you both to relax and enjoy the holidays, then put the event week 15th to the 21st of November into your diary and get on my email list if you are not already. See you back here next week. Have a great rest of your day, a fabulous week ahead, and bye for now. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you head on over to www.rocksolidstudy.com and sign up for my free parent guide. The 3 huge mistakes even smart students make in exams and assignments and how to fix them immediately. And I'll see you back here next week.